Hey guys, William Mayette, creator of Jazz Edge, and welcome to Christmas Bootcamp 2020. This is our fourth and final session. So thank you all very much for joining me if you're joining me live. So got a bunch of people on Zoom and people on YouTube and Facebook. So I just want to say hello and thank you for joining me. And first of all, before I forget, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. I hope that, especially this year with all that we've been through with pandemic and everything, I hope that you have a great holiday, and we're looking forward to 2021, right? All right, so, okay, so moving on. Today, we are going to talk about Jingle Bells, and we're going to do some improvisational fills for Jingle Bells. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to chat in your questions. I'm going to teach first, and then I'll answer questions later, all right? And also remember that all of this material can be found at my jazzchristmasmusic.com website for Jazz Christmas Music members. You can also get the replay and some sheet music absolutely free if you go to jazzedge.com/live. So be sure to check out that link. All right, so let's get started with scales first of all. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, when we improvise over a song, a lot of times if it's like a jazz song or a standard or something, we might utilize multiple scales, meaning that we might have altered scales, half whole diminished scales, whole tone scales, blues scales, pentatonic scales, major scale. We might have 8, 9, 10 different types of scales that we utilize in that one song. Now, depending on the complexity level of the song, but then also the style of the music, and the whether or not the song is kind of like folk song in nature, a simple song, is going to also depend on what kind of scales that you're going to use. So in other words, if I play Jingle Bells, and I start using altered scales and stuff like that, that might sound a little bit weird, right? It just doesn't sound, it sounds a little bit off. So in a song like this, we're not going to utilize a lot of different scales, but we're also not going to utilize just one scale. If we played the blues, right, we could kind of get away with playing like, a 12-bar blues using my C blues scale and stuff like that over all of the chords. Now, even though Jingle Bells is just a 3-chord song, C, F, and G, which is very much, right, like the blues, it doesn't sound good to just use one scale. So instead, what I like to do on songs like this is I like to utilize that pentatonic scale and also the bluesy pentatonic scale. First of all, let's go through the major pentatonic scale first. The major pentatonic scale is the first, second, third, fifth, and sixth notes from your major scale. Again, see why I'm constantly saying you got to know your major scales, because if you don't know your major scales, you're not going to be able to get 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 from that scale. So those are the notes of the C major pentatonic scale. Typically fingering 1, 2, 3, cross under 1, 2, and then maybe 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. You could also figure out what fingering works best for you, and it also depends. You might even just do something like this: 1, 2, 3, 5, depending on where you are in the scale. Remember, practicing the scale is like a scale, like doing that is different than just. It's different than improvising over the scale. When you improvise over the scale, you're typically not going to always be putting your thumb on C, right? I mean, you might play these notes, right, from that C major pentatonic scale. Obviously, you're not going to put your thumb on the C. That's not going to make sense, right? You won't be able to really play that effectively. So instead, see how my fingering shifts. So we have our fingering that we use when we're practicing the scale and learning the scale. That's the fingering that's listed here. But then when we actually improvise utilizing the scale, we just kind of use whichever fingers we want to. And this is where understanding and learning good techniques on how to come up with the proper fingering really helps. All right, so that's the C major pentatonic. You've probably learned that scale before. And that one, quite frankly, it's a little bit flat, right? So we like to jazz it up a bit or blues it up a bit with the C bluesy pentatonic scale. Now, before we move on, it's important that you know that this is in quotes for a very specific reason, because there is no such scale as the C bluesy pentatonic scale. This is something that I call it. In fact, I'm not sure that there's any real particular name for this scale. There might be, but I call it a bluesy pentatonic scale. I'm going to show you why. All right, so first of all, the notes, let's forget about this grace note right there. These are your notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5, or 4 and maybe going back to 1. It's depending if you're gonna go up. You know, if you're gonna keep going up, then it'd be 4 and then put your thumb there. All right, so now, first of all, a lot of times you will hear me mention the bluesy pentatonic scale as this. Okay, I've said this before in lessons, and that's because it's really the same thing as an A blues scale starting on C. That's why I call it bluesy pentatonic. This one, I called it a bluesy pentatonic as well. And the reason is that it's really just adding in blues kind of notes. And what are the blues notes? The flat 3, the flat 7, and then also that flat 6. I could also add in the sharp 4 as well. See, I can do that. Basically, if you look at it, if I play all the notes and I kind of mash them all down, I get this. So what's left? D flat, F natural, right, and B natural. So these are the only 3 notes that I'm kind of avoiding. Everything else, I'm thinking of it as like my kind of bluesy pentatonic scale. All right, so anyway, what I usually like to do is just this. But if you want, you could also add in that. So I add in that G flat in there. I'm sorry, the G sharp rather. Okay, so I can put that G sharp in there. Okay. All right, so that scale I'm going to play on each chord. Not this, like this scale, but the notes are going to be different. So let's talk about that. F major pentatonic, those notes are right there. I didn't even bother to put in the fingering. You know what it is. The bluesy pentatonic scale. Now what's great about this scale too is that it really outlines that dominant 7th chord. Okay, see all these other notes you're adding in there, but it's really outlining that dominant 7th chord, which is kind of cool. See, I can do those turns. And if you need help with turns, just do a search on Jazz Edge for turns. Bunch of lessons there. All right, so that's the F bluesy pentatonic scale. And then finally, let's take a look at the G bluesy pentatonic scale. So what you want to do is get comfortable with each of these scales. What I suggest you do is go back, do C bluesy pentatonic, just play like a C7 chord show there, or root 5 root, whatever you want to do. Root 7 chord show down there, that's fine as well. You want to get comfortable with that scale, right? Do the same thing on the F. Notice the grace note here, I only added this on the C. You could add it if you want on the F as well. And add it on the G's. All right, so it's up to you to add that. All right, so F. And then finally G. All right, so that's the scales. Pretty straightforward. Practice them. Try playing some chord shells in the left hand and just kind of exploring the scale a little bit and, just trying to get comfortable with that scale. All right, so those are your scales. Now what we need to do is, let's take a look at this. I've created a new version for you. This is a simple oompa version of the song, and I'm adding in some fills in the right hand. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play it for you. I'm going to break down line by line what it is that I'm doing, and then allow you to ask questions. So as we go along, just write in the measure number, or make a note to yourself of what measure number we're on and say, hey, in measure 5, you did this. Why did you do that? Okay, so let's go through it, and then you'll see how it all works together. First of all, the simple oompa, let's just go through the left hand real quick. So it's going to be root, and then the fifth in the root for the C. Now on the F chord, I didn't change the chord quality, but down here in the left hand, I'm playing these as dominant chords. You're going to see how, it's kind of fun, but it's not maybe the best choice, and I'll explain that to you as we go later. Sometimes the melody conflicts with that, but the tension is resolved quickly, so it's like, I let it go. I think the F7 sounds kind of neat. If you don't like that sound, there's a real simple way of avoiding that. Just do the fifth in the root. Same thing for G. So that would be it on C, on F, on G, and you're literally going pa, pa. And these are in half notes, so it's not going to move that fast. All right, so you see how I'm like playing that fifth and seventh for the G, the fifth and the seventh for the F, but for the C, I play the fifth and the root. Why don't I play the C7? Because then it's going to make it sound too bluesy, all right? But you can play around with that. Maybe you like that sound. Sure, if you want to play dominant sevenths for all the chords, knock yourself out. That's absolutely fine. So all of that is pretty much the same. All of this goes in, and it's all on the C chord is going to be the root, and the fifth in the root. On the F chord is going to be the root, the fifth and the seventh, and on the G chord is going to be the root and the fifth and the seventh. So that should make the left hand relatively simple, right? It's not that difficult. Let's take a look at it with the melody now. Okay, so let me play that again. I'm going to do a little bit slower for you so you can kind of catch those notes. And here I'm going 3, 2, 1. Now, let's just talk briefly about what's going on here. And then again, if you have questions on it, go ahead and ask those questions in the chat area. So you see that before it was just jingle bells, right? And now you could see here like that these lyrics don't really match up to what's going on here. That's because I'm playing around with the melody. I'm doing this melodic embellishment. You could still sing over the top of it. It could still be jingle bells, jingle all the way, right? So you could still sing while doing that. So if you were accompanying others at like a Christmas party or whatnot, and you wanted to play this version, they could still sing over the top of that, even though down here, you're kind of doing some melodic embellishment, right? Now, if you're just doing it as an instrumental version, well, fine. Then people will know what it is you're doing. And then also, you see how we're getting that E in there enough, E, right? So we're just adding in that little half step there, that little melodic embellishment. So it's just creating a little bit of interest in the melody, but it's not straying too far from the melody. Before I go on, if you want a lesson that's really great for the melodic embellishment, I did that 12 days of jazz, 12 days of jazz at the end of last year, and then that lesson is on the site. So just take a look for 12 days of jazz. There's a great course there with 12 days and all different levels, and one of the levels is melodic embellishment. All right, so that's the first line. Pretty simple. Moving on. Okay, so all this is exactly the same, except right here. Okay. Now, Before I move on, you might be wondering, okay, well, wait a second. Where are you getting these notes, Willie? Where are you getting these notes? Where are you getting these notes? Right here. Okay, well, first of all, the chord is C, right? And going back to this, these are the notes that I'm using, major pentatonic or bluesy pentatonic. And then before you even think, well, which scale is it? This scale contains all of those C major pentatonic notes. So really, you could just think of it as this and just kind of X out this one over here and not even pay attention to this one, because all of these notes are already found right in here. Okay? All right, so I have a C chord, so I'm playing that C bluesy pentatonic sound. And if I don't want it to be too dominant sounding, I just take out that dominant seventh and just play it like that. Now, you'll notice that what I'm doing is when I move to the F chord, I use that bluesy pentatonic scale. When I move to the G chord, I use that bluesy pentatonic scale. So I am not using one scale to improvise over the entire song. I'm using a different scale for each chord. But again, there's only 3 chords, so 3 scales. 3 chords, 3 scales. Okay? And the scales are all of the same type, same quality, just starting on a different note, right? So you get the C, the F, and the G. Okay? All right, so these notes right here are all, right? All based off of that C bluesy pentatonic scale. These notes right here, right? All based off of that G bluesy pentatonic scale. Now this one, the C sharp right here, right? Remember how I said you could add in sharp 4? Well, that's what I'm doing right there. Right, that was the scale, right? But I'm also adding in that note right there. Just like, remember, I could also add in that flat 6 up to the 6, flat 5 up to the 5, or sharp 4 up to 5, sharp 5 up to 6, however you want to think about it, okay? All right, moving on. Line 9, or measure 9. Right? Now, this is great, especially when you start to add in these triplets like this. That triplet feel gives it a real nice feel to it. Just got to fix something here. Getting a little bit of static electricity with all of this dryness here in the winter. So that triplet adds a nice rhythmic change. Right, so we're doing a lot of quarter notes, a lot of eighth notes. So to add in that triplet, you know, adds a nice, it kind of like moves it forward a little bit and makes it so that the rhythm is a little bit faster, right? So again, jingle bells. So jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Right, so here you can still sing Jingle Bells over it, even though I'm not a singer, but while you're playing that in the right hand. So it's just little fills that you can add in. Again, where do these notes come from? Well, I think you can see, right? It's the top 4 notes of that bluesy pentatonic scale. And jingle all the way. I hit my middle finger, right? So this measure right here, measure 12, middle, second, then thumb. Okay, and then going from that measure into this one down here. So, jingle bells. All right, let's do that last line. We already did it. What fun it is to ride in a one. That grace note there, half step up to the G. You could even crush them. You know, if I'm playing, let's say I was going to play this song for a bunch of little kids, then I'd probably do something like this. Or I might do this since I can reach the 10th. that kind of fun, like jovial, kind of kid-like sound by adding in those half steps there, right? Right? It's kind of cool, right? All right, so moving on. Well, let's just make sure we get that last line here. So, and then here I probably hit your fifth finger on that, because then you're going to be coming into this. All right, so you hear that? All right, so here, normally it's, right? So rather than just hanging on that note for a half note, well, what do I do? Add a little bit of motion, a half step motion, and then coming back, but then also do you hear like the rhythmic fill as well? Dee ba dee ba. And I did the same pattern right here. Okay, same exact pattern is going on right there as well. Okay, all right, so now let's move on. Right. All right, what's this right here? This is kind of interesting. So these are all fills, like just based off the scale. But what am I doing here? Here, I'm like figuring, okay, so it'd typically be laughing all the way, right? And holding out that E. Well, I got the E in there as my thumb, but then I'm like, let me get a little bit of motion there. So what am I doing? I'm coming right on down that C7. That C7 kind of sound. Now this is kind of like a Mixolydian sound here. I don't want to scare you off with that, but that's basically what's going on, and I'm doing this in sixths. And typically the finger is 1-5, 1-4, 1-5, 1-4, and then we do this double chromatic right here into that. So I kind of like this, like little, like kind of like feels like a little train. And it's just again, you can see it's coming right off of those notes of the major pentatonic scale. How do I know to use those notes? Well, I try it, right? And remember, improvisation is so much about trial and error. If you're not willing to try and fail, you'll never be able to improvise, right? So let me say that again. If you're not willing to try and fail, you will never be able to improvise, okay? Improvisation is all about failure. Everyone who has ever improvised at any point in life has failed at it, guaranteed, all right? And then by failing and figuring out what you like the sound of and what works and what doesn't work and your own personal style, and learning more theory and technique and all of that, then you finally get to a point where it's like, okay, now I know how to do this. But nobody comes out of the gate, you know, right away playing like, oh, I think I'll sit down and improvise today. And then somehow they magically improvise perfectly. Yeah, you know what? I'm sure there probably is somebody, some genius somewhere, right? But anyway, for us mere mortals, we have to play it, try new things, and then fail at it in order to get better at it. So how do I know this works? Well, I tried it. What if I did more notes of the chord? What if I did those two notes? All right, that's an interesting sound, you know. So I try it, you know. I figure out what I like and see if it works. You know what? Maybe doing double stops. Any licks that you learn, you're doing confident improviser. Well, guess what? Those licks a lot of times are in the key of C, right? You know, you take that C 5-finger blues scale. right? So you can try messing around with some of those licks. Anytime you see this chord here, C chord, then that literally means any lick or phrase or thing that you know over a C chord, you could play it over this as well, likely, right? Is it always going to work? Not always, of course not. It's where you're going to use your ears and a little bit of common sense and figure out like, oh, okay, that works or it doesn't work. All right, so anyway. Okay, and then finally, last line here. This is kind of here's the exact point in which this does not work well as an F7 chord. That's an E natural with an E flat down there. However, check it out. It happens so fast, so as long as you're not going, hey, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Right? As long as you're not stopping there, it's likely going to be fine. You have a couple of different options. Number one, here on this F chord, just do that, or change it to like an F6, right? Or you could change the melody a little bit there. That's a little bit more drastic though, and it's going to not sound as much like Jingle Bells, but you can just simply do the fifth and root there if you wanted to, okay? So up to you. The dominant seventh doesn't bother me enough to change it. Now here I had the idea of like, what about just going up chromatically here, right, and sing, and so I still get the same melody in the right hand, right? But underneath I have a little bit of motion going on. Just creates a little bit of interest. How did I come up with this motion? Well, this pattern is pretty common, right? Going from the third up to the fifth, right? If we did it in C, in F. Some of you might know that from right, Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk. Okay, so it's doing that same pattern. So, and then it's coming down in thirds. And I'd probably do like a little double chromatic down here. I didn't write it in the left hand, but, and this is just a G6 chord right here. If you want to add a little bite, make it a G7. If you want to really add some bite, add the sharp 5 in there as well. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the... Right? All of that stuff is all based off of those scales that I showed you. Right? So nothing that I'm playing here is outside of those scales that we've already talked about or some of the techniques that are already in here. Okay? So this gives you a start. This gives you some stuff to like kind of play around with and have some fun, you know, with Jingle Bells. Now, remember, if you followed me through all 4 of these sessions, we have an easy version, we have a jazz version, we have a boogie version, we have a klezmer version, and now we have an oompa version. Right? So literally you could go from one into the other, into the other, into the other, do some improv. Another question I get a lot of times from students as well is like, all right, do I have to improvise over the whole song? No, of course not. Okay? You can improvise just over a section. In fact, if you wanted to just... So I just kind of like improvise over this C7 chord sound. Yeah, I can just kind of mess around with that C7 chord, just play that over and over and improvise over that. I can improvise over C to F to G. I could also, here's another nice little trick. If you learn my Learn Jazz Piano Today, the basics lesson, which is the Ben's Blues lesson, which is this. Right, so if you learn that lesson, okay, which is found at the Jazz Edge site, you could go from Jingle Bells into that bass line and do some improvising. So in other words, from measure 29, right? And there's that Ben's Blues bass line, walking bass line, along with improvisation. And then you end it. And you go right back into the song, right? So there's some really kind of neat ways of kind of combining together what you know. You can go from a song like this, especially since it's 1, 4, and 5, the song is based on that, C, F, and G. Well, I'm thinking in my head, oh man, I can easily go into a 12-bar blues from here. And then with that lesson, you got that walking bass line, you could do your improvising, you already got the scales over that and do the blues scale. And the nice thing about going through the 12-bar bass line and improvising over that rather than improvising over the form of Jingle Bells is you could add a little bit more grit and dirt to it, a little bit more bluesiness to it. Whereas this, right, since there's no walking bass line there, it's kind of like an oompa or chords or whatnot. That walking bass line, especially with its half-step approaches like that, really adds some nice depth to your accompaniment. So it makes it a little bit more interesting to the ear to improvise over that, okay? Not to say that this is not interesting either, but it's just makes it a little bit more jazzy. Let's put it that way, okay? And that lesson is the Learn Jazz Piano Today lesson, which is found right at the Jazz Edge site, okay? All right, so if you have questions, be sure to use the chat, right? So use the chat in your questions right now. I also want to remind you, in case anyone scoots out while I'm answering questions, the sale that we have, the end of the year sale, ends literally at the end of the year. The replays and everything can be found at jazzedge.com/live. The replays will be removed on Christmas Eve, okay? However, if you are a Jazz Christmas Music member, you can get all of this material right in jazzchristmasmusic.com. If you are not a Jazz Christmas Music member, I suggest going back to jazzedge.com/live. We're running a 50% off sale right now on that. Just so you can see what that looks like. It looks like, hold on a second. Like this, okay? So if you go back to jazzedge.com/live, it will take you to this page. You'll be able to get the replay right here of this session, okay? And then this is all the sale stuff. So if you just click on any one of these things, it's going to take you to the sale page. And then on the sale page, you can go ahead and just click on join, right? This is a lifetime membership, so lifetime access to Jazz Christmas Music. Killer deal at $99, because as I add new material in the upcoming years, you will get to benefit from that as a lifetime member. I can also guarantee you that this is the last time you'll ever see it at $99. Never going to happen again, right? So it's printed on video. You can come back and say, hey, well, you said it was never. But trust me, it won't. Not at $99. I'm ending up adding in so much material, and then when you get into the site and you see how much you have available to you, it's pretty. It's a very nice Christmas present. It's very, very, very good. And if you want a Jazz Edge membership or No Bull membership, these are the lowest prices to get those at as well. This is legacy pricing, so be sure to take a look at that if you're interested. Okay. All right. And I did want to say in the sheet music. So if you go to like the replay for the first session here, you click on download resources. You might see something like that, JCM member only, and right, you click on it, you're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm already a member of Jazz Christmas Music. Why am I not seeing this? Well, it's because you're at the Jazz Edge website. So what you're going to do is already a Jazz Christmas Music member, click here to log in, and that's going to take you over to the actual Jazz Christmas Music website for you to log in. All right, so just make sure that you're logging in at the actual website. Okay. All right. So questions. Let's move on to questions right now. There were a couple of questions already. So let's see here. Okie dokie. Joe, I've been trying grace notes in the right hand for Jingle Bells. For example, E flat to E and F sharp to G. Is it okay to use the same finger for both notes or separate fingers? Oh, no, actually, it's a great thing to use the same finger. But it's going to depend on, where you're kind of going next in your line. All right. So like if I'm doing, so you see how I like kind of went up like that? Well, now that makes sense to kind of do that. But if I'm going to stay on that E, I might not want to do the same finger. That might get a little painful after a while. So like that's where I might use two fingers. Especially like you see how the fingering works out so nicely. 3, 5, 1, 2, 3. So to go. Whereas if I were to do like 2, 2, 2, well, now first of all, my fingering is all kind of messed up anyway. Now I got my fourth finger here. But let's say I use my middle finger. Right? And you just might find that it's a little bit more painful on the finger, especially hitting that several times like that. But if you're going like, if you're doing it every now and again, yeah, the same finger is absolutely fine. Typically, when playing an improvisational line in which you're doing like, you're going to use the same finger. You're not going to do like 4, 3. However, when playing the melody and utilizing grace notes in the melody, that's when you might end up using two fingers. But again, it's going to be dependent upon, you and the situation. So just if you find that's a little bit difficult or a little straining on the finger, well, then maybe just use two different fingers, right? And Merry Christmas as well to you, Joe. Hello, Audrey. Lloyd, is there any way to download the sheet music for all songs and jazz Christmas music? You need to go to each lesson and download the music that way. There's no one big zip file. And I'm not going to do that because as I add new stuff, I have to like change that zip file and everything, and maybe it gets cached on the site. And then some people don't have unzipping capabilities. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time, and like all of that stuff, for every benefit, there's also people that it's a detriment for them. So yeah, unfortunately, you got to go through each one. Luckily, though, there aren't that many songs to download, and then once you have it, then you have all of it. Audrey, lots of boogie woogie questions. All right, good. Let's go through them. Number 1, notice sometimes the bass is F sharp, sometimes G flat, same for A sharp and B flat. Is there any convention on staying within the flats or sharps? Let's take a quick peek at that because I actually want to see that. Hold on one second. I want to pull up the music for that. Hold on one second. Oh, let's see here. Typically, when you have the, so I need to find a spot where it might. Okay, so like take this right here. Right here on the G. Okay, so typically this is how I look at the sharps and the flats and which one to choose. If the line is moving up, well, then I'm going to choose sharps. If the line is moving down, then I'm going to choose flats. Okay, and the reason for that is actually, you know what? This would be good. I'll show it to you this way. It'd be a little bit easier to see it this way. So I'm going to load up a new piece of music here, and I'm just going to create something just real quickly for you so you can kind of see it. Once this thing loads up, almost there, right? So, okay, and start a new score. All right, so if I have my music here and I'm going to do something like this, well, let's do this. Okay, so you see how that's written versus this? Oops. Now, when I see this, for my eyes, okay, and everyone is different, but for my eyes, this looks very clear to me that this is now moving up to the G. Whereas this, it looks almost like it's this and it's going to resolve down to the G, right? Because in my brain, I have to see that, okay, that's flats, but then over here, I need to think, well, wait a second, but that's G natural, right? So this makes it a little bit easier to read it. That's why I do the sharps or the flats like that. But now listen, look what happens if I do this. Okay. So you see that as well? So you see how that flat, see how easy it is to see? Oh, C to B flat to A, and then wait a sharp, oh, okay, it's G sharp. Okay, but then that's G natural right there. Whereas if I do that, isn't that a lot easier to read? Okay. I think that's a lot easier to read because then I see those flats and I know, oh, okay, now I can quickly at a glance see that this line is descending down. Now here, when you move from measure to measure, that's bad enough. But look at what happens when you do it within a measure. Let's do that. Okay. So let's do this like this. Now you see what has to happen here? So this is C, E, F, oh, G flat, right? But then I got to go to G natural and then D sharp. Okay, but then I need to flat it, right? I literally, even as I'm playing this, when I see that, I think the next note is going to go up to E in my brain, right? So this is easier, I believe. Okay, even though you have the F natural there, okay, it's still easier because you see that F sharp moving up to G, the E flat moving down to D flat. So that's why I write it that way. Okay, number 2, I searched a jazz edge site for glissando since mine doesn't sound anything like yours and found Jerry Lee Lewis lesson. Wow, feel like I hit the jackpot. Thanks. That is a good lesson, especially like all of that stuff. There's some really cool stuff in that Jerry Lee Lewis. So observation, once I got the pattern set in my hand, the left hand was much easier. Still working on putting the 2 hands together. Excellent. Love the klezmer version. It was easier than I thought to learn. And sounds great. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome, Audrey. Yeah, that klezmer version, if you guys haven't checked it out, is definitely it's fun, and it adds a nice little twist to Jingle Bells that kind of sets apart that arrangement than the way other people might play it. Right? Like I said, it's always a crowd favorite. Neil asked, how valuable are backing tracks for improv? Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, yeah, they're helpful. It's what it is? A backing track for improv is more fun than anything else. Okay, you could easily use a metronome to keep time. So you don't need a backing track in order to be able to improvise. And also, you should be able to... you should be able to also, come up with an accompaniment and keep time and be able to improvise without having a backing track. So I typically look at a backing track in 2 ways. Number 1, it replaces the metronome and makes it a little bit more fun. But then number 2, it just makes the whole playing experience a little bit more fun. And it's a great prep if you decide that you're going to play along with musicians someday. Okay, if you think you're going to play along with other musicians, then I would say definitely make sure that you're playing along with some backing tracks now. Right? But and there are backing tracks for these for at least the jazz version and the easy version of Jingle Bells using iReal Pro, and that's in the site as well. Measure 12 threw me at first. Yeah, that one's a little tricky, but I'm glad you ended up getting it. All right, so let's see. Dave on YouTube said, yeah. Dave, have you heard of Johnny May? Yeah, of course I've heard of him. I've heard of all the guys that are out there that are doing online piano lessons. I'm a subscriber of his course. Excellent. I hope you enjoy it. Do you have any courses? Yeah, in fact, we got quite a bit. In fact, since you're bringing up Johnny, I took a look at his site last year, and there was something like 200 some odd hours of lessons. There are almost 800 hours of lessons on the Jazz Edge site, and the pricing of our sites are actually quite compatible with one another as well. So there's 4 times more content on the Jazz Edge site. So since you're bringing it up, then I'm going to, say my piece as well on that. So you should definitely check out Jazz Edge. I think if you like Johnny's stuff, then you'll definitely enjoy the Jazz Edge stuff. But if you like Johnny's stuff, then stick with Johnny. Look, here's the thing with other teachers. I don't look at my stuff as being in competition with other teachers. Why? Because no other teachers teach the way that I do, because it's my method and it's like the way that I think about music. So if you like the way another teacher teaches or the way another teacher plays, then by all means you should definitely go and study with them. If you like my way of thinking and my way of breaking stuff down and teaching, then you should study with me. The other thing too is that I think that there's also a lot of value in getting different vantage points, different viewpoints. Like when I went to Berkeley, I didn't study with one teacher. I studied with Paul Schmaling, I studied with Dean Earl, I studied with Bob Winter. It's like I studied with Laszlo Gardoni. I was studying with him. Paul I already said Paul. There's someone else in there. Oh yeah. I'm forgetting his name right now. But anyway, I've studied with Ray Santisi. Great player. In fact, he taught me a lot. He was a really good teacher. But I've studied with multiple teachers, and you get all different things from multiple teachers. So anyway, glad to hear you're doing well with him. So keep up the good work, and maybe at some point I will see you at the Jazz Edge site as well. All right. Any other questions? Okay. You're welcome, Audrey. All right. All right. So anyway, let me remind you just real quickly, the sale on the site. So Dave, you were saying like you're at Johnny's site. If you're interested in signing up at Jazz Edge, definitely go back to jazzedge.com/live. Take a look at the sale there. Notice that when you are on the sales site as well, it's right here, okay? It's not bonking you over the head with like, oh, buy. It's right here. So if you're interested, this is the sale. It's ending in 9 days, 13 hours, 7 minutes. And guaranteed, 9 days, 13 hours, 7 minutes, and 2 seconds, this page will be gone, and that pricing will also be gone. If you're locked in, then you're locked in. If come January 1st, you're like, hey, I wanted that special, they'll be like, well, you got to pay whatever the going rate is then. So if you're interested in signing up for a special, now is the time to do it. All right. So anyway, for those of you who are already my Jazz Christmas Music members, this video will be up on the site momentarily. The sheet music for this lesson is already there, so you can go ahead and log in right now and start to take a look at the sheet music. But the video will be up there within the hour. So that's it. All right. So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much, guys. I will send you a Christmas message over email, but this is the last time that I'm going to be doing a free webinar. So I will have my coaching today for my students. I will have office hours tomorrow and stuff like that. But if I don't see you again, and you happen to be catching me live right now, have yourself a wonderful Christmas, wonderful holiday, whatever you celebrate. I hope you have a beautiful time, healthy, happy, safe time with your family. And of course, I appreciate all of you. I love all of my students, because if it weren't for you, I couldn't do what I do. So if you like what I do, know that you have a stake in that, right? It's because of you that I can do what it is that I do. So thank you. I appreciate it. And here's to a better 2021. Hopefully 2021 will be a little bit easier for all of us globally. All right. So anyway, thanks a lot, guys, and I will see you soon. All right. Take care, guys. Bye.